So we caused a little turbulence over in Walther land recently. And though Walther released a statement, I won't be retracting my concern on the design of the PDP's optics mounting system. This is a long one, so strap in. Let's get to work. Guys, Work here. Welcome back to Work the Trigger. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that Walther's released the new hotness. The pistol to end all pistols.
The new Walther PDP.
The Walther PDP.
Walther PDP. Walther PDP.
The PDP. Now, as you can see from my initial reaction, I actually really like the gun. It looks great, it shoots accurately and easily, it has a great trigger, and the grip texture on it is one of, if not the best on the market. But then I dove in a little deeper and discovered what I see as a weakness in the design. So this weakness may not prove to be the Achilles heel for all users. If you're an iron sights guy, then you have absolutely nothing to worry about. If it's a safe queen, you also don't really need to worry. Or if you're an average user that gets it out once every month or two and shoots a box of shells through it, you're probably gonna be okay too. I wasn't really clear enough about that in my first video. If this gun was marketed as like a have fun weekend gun or went for under 500 bucks, $15, probably wouldn't have said anything at all. But it's not. It's marketed as a rugged, duty handgun, made to be run hard and priced high enough to have confidence in the design based purely off of the price and brand reputation. But the more you get into actually using this gun, the more risk of failure you're gonna see with it. So what is the problem? Well, I went over it in some detail in my last video. I'll put a link up here for that. But in case you didn't watch it and don't want to watch it, the cliff notes are that there's no solid interface between the optics plate and the slide that it mounts on, which means all motion between those two surfaces is held just by the threaded fasteners that are going into it. And in proper design applications, threaded fasteners are not supposed to hold shear force across the threaded face. Now, before we get into Walther's published literature on their optics system and how it's supposed to function, I want to first cover a couple of common comments that I saw on the last video. First up was the plate. The plate that I was using in that particular video is a plate from C&H Precision Weaponry, made specifically for the PDP with an RMR footprint on it. This is a purpose-built plate, but it's not the OEM plate. So instead, I waited until my OEM plate came in to be able to continue this and do any more testing. And when it did come in, I was a little bit surprised. Damn! The OEM plate doesn't fit much better. Next is the superiority of engineers, German engineers specifically.
The Germans?
You really should check out Walther's recall page. It's a page turner, as in it has more than one page. Engineers aren't infallible and often can't see past their usage envelope. Now, Walther is far from the only firearms company that has had recalls in the industry. And I value engineers. I work with them every day. They are necessary, but they're not perfect.
There's no such thing as perfect.
Nobody is. The third common comment was that the optics plate was loose because it didn't have any screws holding it down, which is true, but also kind of the point. Go back and watch the other plates that I used. You'll see that all of those plates have very minimal movement, and that's because the systems that they're designed to utilize lock the plate in place without the need for the screws. The screws are only there to hold the plate down on the surface. All of that force is taken up by lugs hidden underneath the plate. Now, what that means on the PDP is unless there's something else holding that plate still, all the force is taken up by those screws. And the last viewer example I'd like to address a little bit is the wheels on a vehicle analogy. The wheels on a vehicle are held on with threaded fasteners, and they are under shear force, which you're right about and also wrong about. Yes, wheel studs are threaded fasteners, specially designed threaded fasteners, which I talked about a little bit in the last video, where the base of that fastener is actually unthreaded and thicker than the threaded portion. That's the portion that, if the force were to overrun that friction force, that's where that shear force would actually end up. Now, speaking of that friction force, another difference with that is that vehicle wheels are typically held on with between 4 to 8 studs. Each one of those studs is typically torqued to around 100 pound-feet of torque, which applies a clamp load of about 1,667 pounds. And that's per fastener, as opposed to the PDP's optics plate, which is held on with 18 inch-pounds, which gives you about 108 pounds per fastener. That is over 38 times the clamp load on a wheel as it is on the PDP. So now that that's out of the way a little, let's go ahead and talk about Walther, their press release, and the gun itself. So on March 15th, Walther released a statement called Walther PDP Optics Plate Stress Test. You'll have to Google it, unfortunately, because YouTube won't let me link it down below. But this document covers varying design considerations and aspects, as well as their testing. As you can see, they've included a layout of their design and how it's supposed to work, as well as a written explanation. So let's go over that explanation really quick and dig into it a little bit. In their words, the high stress / loads for the slide and mounted parts result from the acceleration of the slide while firing around. The acceleration can go up to 1,800 G, which is 1,800 times the force of gravity. Which for a 2-ounce optic means about 225 pounds of force. The force on the adapter plate, which results from this effect, is transferred over the pressing face from the adapter plate to the slide. The design of the whole system is so that the adapter plate is always pressing against this transfer area. Again, always pressing against this transfer area. The negative acceleration in the opposite direction, which would be the acceleration from the side closing, is extremely small. The force in this direction can be held easily from the screws in combination with the friction between the adapter plate and slide. So what they're saying is the force that they took into exception during design was the rearward acceleration of the slide. In this design, this face is designed to keep in constant contact with this face here on the slide, keeping any overage of the clamp load friction off the fasteners, because again, fasteners like this are not built to take shear load across the threaded face. There's only one problem. That's not the way it's working. As you can see, there is a gap in between the slide and the optics plate, meaning these two surfaces are not in constant contact and the slide is not supporting overload forces from the movement. And this is not just my gun like this. Numerous guns on numerous pages from Facebook to forums are showing this same space between the plate and the slide. Now, whether the design is wrong or the machining tolerances didn't work out right, it doesn't matter, because this is the reality of how the system is working on released production firearms.
Is this real life?
Yeah, this is real life.
This means that in order to properly hold the force off the threaded fasteners, which in a proper design should not be submitted to shear force again, the design is relying solely on the clamp force and the friction between this plate and the slide to hold the optic and everything in place. To determine the holding force of this connection, we need to determine the friction force between those two surfaces, which can be calculated using the normal force. In this case, the normal force, because the plate and the optic gravitationally weigh so little, the normal force in this aspect would be the clamp force provided by the fasteners, which, as stated above, per Walther's requirement is 18 inch-pounds of force. This equates to about 108 pounds of clamp load per fastener, giving us a combined clamp load of about 216 pounds. Now, taking this number, multiplying it by the coefficient of friction for steel on steel for this particular application, steel to steel has a coefficient of friction of between 0.4 to 0.8. The higher the number, the higher the friction, therefore the higher the load that it would take to move that. So we're going to go ahead and take the highest end we can at 0.8. Again, using our 216 pounds of clamp load and that 0.8 coefficient of friction, we can see that we get a friction force of resistance of about 172.8 pounds. Now, going back to Walther's release, they state that the optic can see up to 1,800 times the force of gravity. That means, on a 2-ounce stop, that this equates to roughly 225 pounds of force, leaving a discrepancy of over 50 pounds of force being imparted directly onto the fasteners with every shot taken, because the surfaces that they say are in constant contact aren't. Now, this won't equate to enough to break the bolts right off the bat.
Up in your ass with the resurrection. Is the group harder than an erection that shows no affection?
But over time, this will wear the material and, given enough time or out of design scope use, cause failure. And all of that is thrown onto its head when you use the gun outside of the design scope. A concerning factor is their oversimplification of firearms forces and use. As I said earlier, this is a firearm marketed as a duty gun, a firearm used in non-typical circumstances, where forces outside of the standard use envelope should be considered.
Use the force.
An optics mounting system is not excluded from this atypical use consideration. You'd be hard-pressed these days to find a firearms trainer that would not advocate using the optics as a charging surface when doing one-handed manipulations. Just a few weeks ago, I had a few stuck loads in a different pistol, and I had to mortar the pistol slide open utilizing the dot. Let's take a look at that diagram that Walther provided us again and figure out which direction these forces are being applied. As you can see, the forces we are now imparting in this is the opposite direction as Walther had designed in their system to hold. Not only that, but in the instance of a mortar, similar to Aaron Cowan's fence punching methods, these forces can be pretty extreme. So my concern with the PDP, again, is where those forces are being supported in this system. Add on to this any forces the optics could see after being dropped on its side, placing force in an unsupported lateral direction. And you've got a system with exactly one use: shooting at the range. At the bottom of this release, Walther spoke about their testing of the firearms and their 50,000 round test. Walther took 4 guns total to a test at what they call high round counts. 2 were tested until 10,000 rounds, with a single plate and optic attached and not changed. No issues in that case were reported. 1 pistol was chosen and had 20,000 rounds shot, with the dot mounted. The release claims that, quote, there was no maintenance performed on the plate during the 10,000 rounds. No issues appeared, no loose screws. Now, this discrepancy in the numbers on their section could just mean that they copy and pasted, which is what my assumption is, and that they actually meant on this 20,000 rounds. Or it could be that one of the 2 above 10,000 round test pistols was reassembled and run another 10,000 rounds, meaning again, we have a 10,000 round test, not a 20,000 round test. Finally, the wording on this last portion is very important, as the internet has been touting 50,000 rounds have been tested. Again, quote, 1 pistol was chosen and had 50,000 rounds shot with different versions of red dot sights and different versions of adapter plates. While the same red dot and mounting plate was mounted, no maintenance on the plates was done. No issues appeared, no loose screws. What this means is that Walther tested a PDP to 50,000 rounds. The gun was tested. Meanwhile, they mounted plates and red dots on it during this time and tested multiple instances of the plate at significantly lower round counts. So the system has not, in fact, been tested to 50,000 rounds. The gun has. As far as regular shooting, it might hold up. But if you're a dedicated self-defense practitioner, practicing hard with your gear,
I just fucking shot myself.
Taking classes and doing things like using the optics to manipulate the gun, or if you drop the gun and it hits the wrong angle, this system is much less durable than other options. Will it work at the range? Yes, probably. But for a gun designed to be used more than just the range, on duty, in real-life situations, this design is, in my opinion, subpar. And I'm not going to give them a pass on the design just because they're Walther.
The Walther PDP.
Really quick, for transparency's sake, let's jump to a tabletop and show the dot getting installed with witness marks on the fasteners to try to dot all the I's and cross all the T's before our next steps.
See next morning.
Hi, next day here, and I'm actually going to split the video of putting the dot on into another video. Lots of reasons. Primarily it's because YouTube doesn't like that, and there's a high likelihood that that video will get pulled down or hidden or just not get traffic at all. They don't like dot videos, especially videos showing you putting on the dots. So we will put that in another video coming out soon. The gun is not over to the gun shop yet, but at the end of that video, we'll also be dropping the gun off, and you'll be able to see where it's going. So we'll get back to it now. Now, what is our long-term plan? Since no one else is interested in testing the PDP hard, we will.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
This gun, now that we have the dot installed, is headed to Applied Ballistics in Lafayette, Indiana, where it will sit in their rental case at a decreased rental price, red dot and all, to drive the round count on the assembled gun up. This is the fastest way to drive round counts up on the gun, in a way that will allow the gun and optic to settle in. We'll leave the gun there for a while, probably months, to get upwards of 10,000 rounds through this gun. I have requested that no maintenance take place on the gun. Any failures or issues be reported to me and I'll take care of them. No bolts should be tightened, but if they become loose, I should be notified.
We have to light the ancient warning fire. The fire has not burned for 5,000 years. Men won't know what it means.
Other than regular cleaning and lubrication, they're going to leave it alone. And in case you're wondering, Aaron, the owner of Applied Ballistics, is a self-identified Walther guy, as seen in our video, Carry Optics Shootout, linked up here. So Aaron is not rooting for me on this one. He is, however, rooting for honesty and solid product quality. So if we do see an issue, Aaron will give us nothing but honesty. So after we run the rounds up, I'll take the firearm back and pull the dot off.
No disassemble!
To see if there's been any shift in our mark fasteners holding the plate on. I will not, however, be retightening these bolts, loosened or not. But I do want to see if the round counts loosen the bolts, as it's a high possibility due to the design. Then I'll be working on testing the system a la Aaron Cowan. No, I'm not planning on being nice to this system, but also no, I'm not planning on doing anything unreasonable. Aaron's testing has become standardized testing in the firearms community for optics, and the mounting systems for optics should be as robust as the dots themselves. Yes, we'll be dropping, and yes, we'll be fence punch posting with the PDP to see what happens to this system. Hopefully the Holosun 507C sitting on top of this thing can withstand it, but if not, we're just going to keep going, because we're testing the plate and not the optic. So there you have it. That's our long-term plan for the PDP, to see if what I feel is a design deficiency affects the life or use of the pistol. If you've got any modifications to our testing plans beyond shoot the gun yourself or be nice, it's just a gun, shoot it, go ahead and write those down in the comments below and we'll take them into consideration. I hope this video helps clears up my concerns of the design of the PDP and why I think it might be an issue.
Houston, we have a problem.
We've already seen issues derived from the design such as zero shift, but hopefully this will help determine if any other long-term issues are there to worry about. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope this clears things up a little bit. If you like this video, go ahead and hit like below. If you're interested in our follow-up on this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Now, it is going to be a while before that video comes out because we want to be thorough on this. It's going to take some higher round counts. It's not just going to break at 500 rounds. It's going to be thousands of rounds in. But we want to be thorough on the testing of this particular item. If you guys think, in spite of some of the stuff that I've talked about, that it's still a solid design, do me a favor and write down why in the comments below. And that why can't just be because Walther said. I need solid design input from you with knowledge on how forces work to be able to hold a solid conversation. I'm open to this thing being a good design. I'm on Walther's side on this. I want this to be a good gun. It is a good gun. I just worry about this one design aspect. Just one small problem! So thanks guys for watching. Remember, I appreciate every one of you. Until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.